Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and children of all ages, it's time once again to play the internet's #1 game show, Wheel of Irrelevant Tabletop Role-Playing Game Topics. Ding! And we've got a brand new topic on the wheel. This is the first time this one has been on the wheel, but it's not really a new topic. It's the same topic we've always had ever since we started this. You're playing my game wrong. And this version is regarding dungeons, specifically ecology of the dungeons and the preps of the dungeon. And really, what is this dungeon thing anyways? And people always say I should give more DM tips for beginner gamers. Well, so, okay. I don't know how this argument started. I think basic experts involved in it somehow, and Crafty Matt Craft, and whether you dungeon ecology, prepping the dungeon, not prepping a dungeon, do you prep a dungeon, does a dungeon have an ecology? What is a dungeon? All right, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, and whatever else you identify as, this is a dungeon. This is the Tower of London, probably one of the most famous dungeons in the world. You want to know what it looks like inside the Tower of London? This. I've been there. It's not very exciting. It's small, it's cramped, it's dismal. You can see where Lady Jane carved her initials on the wall. You can see the passage down to the water where they brought the boats in. You could see where they beheaded her. It's not very exciting. It's got oubliettes, it's got holes. It's dungeons are not very exciting. They're pretty boring. You know what the ecology of a dungeon is? Rats, bugs, birds, maybe bats. You know what a dungeon isn't? You know what a dungeon isn't? A dungeon is not this. This does not exist. This is made up. There is nothing in the real world that is the equivalent to a D&D dungeon. The closest you can get is either a vast cave complex, or maybe a pyramid, or possibly the necropolises in France. And even then, they are nowhere near the trap-filled, monster-filled, wandering monster-filled, multi-level nightmares that we associate with dungeons. So to argue the prep/ecology of a dungeon and how realistic it should be, it's pointless, because you know what really lives in these things? These dungeons, these caves? Rats, bugs, birds, maybe bats, possibly bears if it's the winter. You know, it doesn't live in any of these places. Orcs, dragons, monsters, beholders. Yeah, because those aren't real. So the fact that we are arguing over the ecology of a dungeon is pointless. But the rules say it's a game about goblins with sticks. It's not real life. Doesn't matter what the rules say or don't say. It's not real. You should not be sending death threats or to people simply because they see this imaginary construct a different way than you see an imaginary construct. All a dungeon is, in the terms of our hobby, is a place that you give them limited ability to get into and get out of, right? That it could be anything, right? I've argued that the Death Star is a dungeon, and that's gotten me in trouble. But I mean, you know, it's an example everybody knows, and it's, you know, in the terms of the reality of Star Wars, it was a place that was very difficult to get into. Once they got into it, there was only so many things they could do, and there were only so many ways they could leave. But within that, the logic and the physics of Star Wars said, this is the story I need to tell. through the Death Star. And once you leave it, that's it, right? I mean, you might go back, you might not go back, you might blow it up. I don't know what you're going to do, but I don't really need to worry about it. So what we're really arguing about is what happens to the dungeon if they leave, right? What is the ecology of the dungeon? And I think that depends on the dungeon, right? So like, there's basically two types of dungeon. There's the one and done, and there's the we might go back. And then there's the we're definitely going to go back, but those are mega dungeons or epic dungeons. We're not covering this. We're just covering the typical 5-room printed module dungeon, the underground thing, you know, the Tower of London. All right. You're going to the Tower of London. You're going in the dungeon because you need to do something. You need to get a MacGuffin. You need to stop something. You need to solve something. The dungeon has a story it wants to tell you. The story has a beginning, middle, twist, end. Once you're done with whatever you had to do in the Tower of London, once you're done whatever you had to do in the Tomb of Unknown Soldier, once you're done with whatever you had to do on the space station, you leave. And you're probably never, ever, ever going to go back. So the ecology of the dungeon only has to be what's necessarily there to tell the story of the dungeon. In the Tower of London dungeon, you're going to run into appropriate encounters that tell the story of the physics of the rules of the Tower of London. If it was real life Tower of London, it would be guards during the day, security during the night, and rats, insects. They have a lot of cats. And if it was fantasy version, there might be guards and undead and whatever, right? But that is the ecology of a one and done dungeon. And once it's done, are you going to go back to the tomb? You've gotten the MacGuffin. Why do you need to go back to the tomb? You don't. You never go back. Why would you go back? Why would you go back to the Tomb of Horrors? Why would you go back to White Plume Mountain? Why would you go back to Statting of the Hill Giant? Why would you go back? It's told the story it needs to tell. You've done what you need to do. You don't have to go back. Therefore, the ecology of the dungeon doesn't matter. It only matters if the idea is that this is a place you might return to more than once. And if you clear something out, it might refill. And that's where we're getting to the second part of the argument, that the dungeon is a living, breathing organism with its own ecology. And that ecology is something we need to be concerned about. And if you're not concerned about it, you're a horrible, awful person. Again, this is make-believe. This doesn't exist. This is not a real place. It does not have to make sense. There does not need to be an ecology other than the ecology in regards to the story the location has to tell. This is a city that got buried underground and everybody got killed and now their spirits haunt the city. Okay, so the ecology is ghosts and undead. Yes. So when I clear out all the undead, is there something that will regenerate new undead? Yes or no? No. Then that's it, right? It's empty. That doesn't mean something might move in later on, right? I mean, if you empty a house out, there's going to be squatters eventually, right? We know that from anybody who lives in a major city. But are you going to go back? Or is it somebody else's problem? Is it even part of the story you want to tell of the adventure? Does it matter? Is it worth getting upset over? No. No, it's not. Because again, it's make-believe. This doesn't exist. This is not a real place. There is no Underdark. The worst thing that lives under there that isn't us is maybe if you're really, really unlucky, you get stuck or you run into a hibernating bear, right? But most of the horrible stories you hear about actual spelunking, actual real life dungeon crawling in the real world is people getting lost and people getting stuck. So you don't have to, what am I even trying to say here? I'm trying to say it's a pointless argument. There's no reason to get mad at people because they either agree or disagree whether a dungeon has a ecology or not and whether you need to prep it or not. And you need to think about what happens after they leave or not. Are they going to go back? Then it doesn't matter. It literally doesn't matter. It's a fucking thrill ride. Once they've gone through it once, That's it, right? They're probably 9 out of 10 times going to move on to the next dungeon. We finished the stending of the hill giant chief. Now we need to move on to the ice giant place, right? Are we ever going to go back to the hill giant chief place? No. Does anybody ever ask what happened to the hill giant place chief after we left it? Only once. Does anybody care what happened to Tomb of Horrors after it's gone? We're gone? No. What about White Plume Mountain? Does anybody care about what happened to it now that we're done with it? No. Tomb of the Lizard King. Anybody care? We're done with it. We're never coming back. No, I don't care. We're never coming back. It doesn't matter. Maybe I'll ask about it again in 20 years and the DM will think about it. Oh, yeah, what did happen to that place? Because it doesn't matter, because it's made up, because it's not real. So there's no reason to be angry at somebody over this. This is silly. What is a dungeon? It's made up. It's not real. What is the ecology of a dungeon? It doesn't matter. It's not real. What is the ecology physics of my world? It doesn't matter. It's not real. It's magic. There's literally magic in this game. It's the cheat code of the universe. And once you admit that there is magic in the game, anything goes. So you do not have to worry about what are they eating, where are they pooping, how do they get in, how do they get out, what do they do with the dead bodies, what happens if we clear out a room and come back a year later? Has somebody else moved into that room? I've got a wandering monster chart. If it's really a question you're going to ask, I'll check. Okay. It's been about 6 months since you've been here. I don't know. So that's like, I don't know what, 1 roll a month. Randomly roll 6 times. If I get a 1, something moved in. Oh, 1. Okay, something moved in the 3rd month. And it's a hibernating bear. You run into a bear. You run into some orcs. Problem solved. That's the ecology of the dungeon. Are you going to go back there? Then I'll worry about it. It needs to be a living, breathing, real part of my world. No, it doesn't. But Gygax said, no, he didn't. But it says right here, no, it doesn't. It's whatever you want it to be. It's whatever your players want it to be. If your players want to go back and are invested in the story of the dungeon, take a week to come up with the story of the dungeon. If they're telling you, yeah, we're going to go back, we're going to go back. You know what we're going to do? We're going to colonize the place. We're going to turn it into a salon for orcs, right? Because orcs need hair care too, right? So that's what we're going to do. We're going to turn the dungeon into a salon. So we need to go in and we need to clear out the entire dungeon, and then we need to turn it into a salon for the orcs. And maybe by doing this, we will alleviate the stress between the orcs and the elves, because now the orcs are going to look just as good as the elves. And, you know, maybe that'll alleviate some of the tension, right? So that's where, only in scenarios like that. I'm not saying it's not going to happen. I can think of 1 or 2 games I've been in when people have gone back to colonize a dungeon, you know, or turn it into their base or whatever. But it's rare. And again, it never really came up. What are they eating? How are they pooping? Where's the water coming from? How do they get in? How do they get out? Where do they sleep? What happens if the room is empty? Does somebody move back in? That's what the wandering muster tables are for. If it's really that important. I don't think it's worth anybody getting upset about or angry about or, you know, threatening people or whatever this is. It's guys, it's I don't know how many times I say this. It's a silly game about goblins with sticks. Whether it's space, superheroes, Old West, fantasy, horror, science fiction, modern day, creeks and crawdads, it's a silly game about goblins with sticks. It's not real. It doesn't matter. It's not worth getting angry at somebody over because they said something that you disagreed with. I disagree with that. Okay. I think the dungeon doesn't need to have an ecology. That's fine. Your dungeons don't need to have an ecology. My dungeons do have an ecology. That's great. I'm glad that you have the extra time and effort and love for your world to actually think about that. If it's really important to you and it helps tell the story of your world, go for it. Dude, if you've got that kind of time and energy, great. Fuck, write it up and publish it. But am I going to fight you over it? No. Why should I? It's not real. It's made up. This does not exist. You know what exists? Caves. You've gone from everybody's beautiful in their own way to just play everybody's beautiful. Ugh. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Just play. Just if you need your dungeon to have an ecology and it's important to you and you've got the time and the energy and the wherewithal to do that, great. Wonderful. That's amazing. I 100% support you. Fuck, type it up and publish it. You could be the next Shadow Dark. I don't know. And if you're like me and you just don't care, well, ecology in my dungeon, I'll worry about it if you go back. Great. Wonderful. More power to you. If that's it. That's all, that's what's important to you. Great. Do you enjoy it? Are you having fun? Then who cares? Why is this a thing? Why is this a thing? What? Why? I don't know. I guess we just need a reason to be angry at each other about this hobby. When we're not being angry at Wizards of the Coast, we can be angry at each other. I don't like what you said about my game. Therefore, I'm going to be angry at you. Well, I disagree with what you said about my game, so I'm going to be angry at you back. Because it's my game, and if you don't play my game my way, you're playing it wrong. It's not your game, and you're not playing it wrong because it's silly. It's a silly game about goblins with sticks. It's only when we stop forgetting that these arguments break out. And then we're threatening people and posting videos and stuff. And it's like, it gets all ugly and stupid and dumb and angry. And it's like, we just have forgotten that it's a kid's game about goblins with sticks. And it means nothing. It's just, it doesn't affect the crops or whatever it is, I'm just blabbing now, but I just sometimes I got to spin that wheel and see what the irrelevant controversy of the week is. And this week it's dungeon ecology or not. I don't know. If you appreciate me doing this, let me know. If you never want to hear me do this ever again, let me know. If you'd have no idea what I'm talking about, that's completely understandable. It's Friday. I'm tired. And, we got sometimes we just want to get on here and blab with you guys. All you wonderful people. Thanks for taking time out of your day to listen to the stupidity that comes out of my mouth. If you appreciate, that, we could do it again. And if you never want to hear me do this again, hey, it's your channel. I'm not doing this for me. I'm doing this for you guys and to get 2001 subs. But, so what do you want to talk about? At the end of the day, I want to talk about what you want to talk about. Till next time, I'm the OG GM. Stay safe out there. Drive safe. Be careful. And, I haven't said it for a while. So get off my land. Till next time, here's some music.
Yo, check. Yeah, we're not the type to play games. You can stay claims. Came to show the move.